Hello and welcome to the Three Questions podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm your host, Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. Are you or someone close to you considering selling a home somewhere here in the United States? Well, if so, you're not going to want to miss today's episode of the Three Questions podcast. We're going to address the three questions sellers should ask before listing their property. Thank you, and thank you for taking time to check us out. And if you enjoyed this episode of the Three Questions podcast, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Before listing your property in California, you ought to be aware of the unique escrow-related challenges that can impact the sale process. Understanding them ahead of time can help you prepare your property for sale, have realistic expectations, and smoothly navigate the escrow process. To discuss this and more is my very special guest this week from Studio City, California, and that's Marcine Kline. She is the Vice President of Closed Escrow. I can say this with certainty. Marcine is one of the escrow industry's leading professionals. She is a true pro. And her full-service escrow offering includes some specialization just above and beyond the regular buying a regular home. She also specializes in probate and trust sales and conservatorships, both court and independent administration of the Estate Act transactions. Marcine, I'm so glad you're able to join us again. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me, Wayne.
Great to see you, and lots to cover here today, lots to unpack, as they say. I thought before we get to our three questions, it would be helpful if you could share with our audience, and I think about my Canadian friends, where there is no real escrow process, everything is handled by an attorney. But just to share with the audience why the role of an escrow officer is so important when it comes to the sale of a home. I think you're an expert in this, and I know you probably could go on for quite a while, but give us sort of why this is so important.
So escrow agents are supposed to act as a third-party fiduciary. We're technically Switzerland in every transaction. We help bring agreements, legal docs, money together. And once all those things are all in place and we're in a position to close a transaction, we're the ones who control all that. The Western states in the United States are escrow driven. The middle of the US tends to be title driven. So title companies handle closings. And like, for example, in Canada, as you mentioned, everything is attorney driven. And the Eastern states are more attorney driven than any of the other states in the US. So we do have a very key role in what we do, and we provide a service that attorneys just don't do here in most Western states. And frankly, the way the contracts are written, for sure in California, I can't speak for other states, you don't even really need an attorney to walk you through these transactions.
In California.
Yeah, in California. Most of us should be able to answer any questions that you have. I don't think it's a good use of anyone's money to spend money on attorney time. And they're very expensive. Real estate attorneys here are very
all
expensive.
My attorney friends are going, oh.
Well, I'm just saying, and attorneys will say the same thing. If you run into some major horrible problem, then you're going to want to consult an attorney. So it is
just for your standard transaction, it's not required.
Yeah, even the more complex ones, even probate transactions, attorneys are involved as to their role in the probate, as they would anywhere in the US or Canada. So it is done a little differently here. I do have a big practice in the probate space, so I work with a lot of those types of attorneys as well.
Well, I guess we'll be doing a follow-up here in the not too distant future on probate and escrow. I can see I'm brainstorming here live. I definitely will need to have you back for that. Well, a little bit of research, there's some, I would say, escrow related challenges that California residents should be aware of, and there's a few, and haven't got all of them, but there's a natural hazard disclosures, there's title and ownership issues, there's home inspections and repairs, and again, I can personally vouch for that because I'm going through an escrow process in Ohio right now where we're dealing with that. And there's also, there's structural regulations that are specific to California retrofitting. And then on top of that, there's capital gains tax. There's lots to think about, lots, and I didn't even list everything. But again, the key here is to proactively issue these challenges, and by doing that, you can. I think you would agree. You'll facilitate a more smooth escrow process and minimize that potential for legal disputes, and maybe some would argue may even help improve on the what you actually end up getting for the sale of the property. So
Right.
I would think you would agree with that. Now, I know for a fact that our audience is really eager to know what questions they should be asking about their upcoming real estate sale. So what we're going to do is we're going to address the three questions sellers should ask before listing their property. And let's just get right to it, Marcine.
Okay.
Question number one, and this one's going to be specifically here to good old Los Angeles. As a resident of the city of Los Angeles, can you explain the newly imposed taxes on properties located within LA, and specifically what areas of the city of LA do these taxes apply to? Sort of a
So,
double question.
right. So the California Constitution sets transfer taxes throughout the state of California. And the transfer tax is $1.10 per thousand per value. Many, many, many years ago, we have of our taxpayers voted in an additional city tax, and a few of the municipalities around us also voted that tax in. And for LA City residents under 5 million, that tax is an additional $4.50 per thousand. Recently,
It's a pretty decent sized tax
oh,
rate there.
no, it gets even better with ULA, a bill that was recently passed. Any property that sells over 5 million, and there are thresholds at 5 million and 10 million, the tax is comprehensive and goes up to $9 a thousand from
Oh,
zero plus the $1.10, and then it goes up to that's 950. It goes up another dollar. It goes up to 1050 a thousand comprehensive over 10 million. And it's really put a big halt on the upper markets because these come to the hundreds of thousands of
yeah.
dollars. There's a lot of very expensive homes here on a $20 million home. The additional tax is approximately $1 million. So people are really, the tax has been impugned here in LA city limits to help the homeless. And there's been other taxes imposed, another assembly bill several years ago that every document that recorded, our recording fees were like $20, and now they're like $95. So the difference goes also toward helping the homeless, but unfortunately, a lot of us city residents aren't feeling that vibe. I don't know where you live, Wayne, but I'm in the heart of the San Fernando Valley, so you
I'm
deal
in
with it.
Westlake Village.
Yeah, you're not
I'm on
seeing
the
it.
Ventura County side.
Sorry, you're not seeing it like we do here. And
Yeah.
I was born and raised here, and there really was no homelessness or anything until the very, very late 1980s, like maybe 1989. And that had to do with public policy closing all the mental hospitals. And a
Hmm.
lot of these people had nowhere to go, and families don't want to take them in. So the homelessness here is just really epidemic. And on some levels, I don't know about you, but on some levels feels a bit incurable. But they're imposing these huge taxes. They've been challenged. I don't see anything changing. Culver City, which is adjacent to LA city limits and part of Los Angeles County, Culver City tax is $33 per thousand, Wayne.
Hello.
And Berkeley, and I don't know if it's changed, was the most expensive taxing authority, but not now, at $15 per thousand. And in the Northern California region, which is where Cal State Berkeley, UC Berkeley is, pardon me, buyers and sellers split a lot of those costs, but we do not do that down here. It's all very areaized. So ULA was designed to penalize the sellers and the more wealthy, which I don't know, at the 5 million mark, the way things have escalated over the last like 20 years, it's not, you're talking every type of property there is. This isn't just homes. This is
I was gonna say
commercial
this is
property,
commercial and
residential income.
industrial.
Yeah, it impacts so many people on so many levels. And, it's just really almost halted all that kind of transactional work to a stop. I mean, the amount of transactions in those price points are not happening.
Very interesting. Yeah,
So it's something to consider when you're selling, if you're over a certain price point, at least in LA city limits, and check other municipalities around you. Santa Monica also has an imposed tax. I don't know the exact dollar amount, but they have one. Culver City, as I mentioned. Pasadena has a smaller one, but they are very, very hefty here in LA City.
you would
So,
also have a buyer give buyers second thought as well as to whether they want to
right,
buy.
because they're going to be in the same boat.
I
I
was just
wanted
going
to,
to
I want
exactly.
to share something very ironic about it. Cities that are self-incorporated inside city limits of LA, one of them being Beverly Hills, has never, ever imposed a city tax. So if you sell $1 million property in Beverly Hills, the transfer tax is $1,110. I'm sorry, is on $1 million property is $1,110. The same property in LA city limits is $5,650. So it's just very ironic that some of the most expensive real estate on the planet is centric to Beverly Hills and they have no taxes. Malibu as well. That's LA County, no tax, no tax. ULA and all these other areas don't impact that. It's just
Duly
very
noted.
ironic.
Duly noted. Yet another reason to move back to Malibu.
Yeah, there you
go. Wow, that's a great way to get things started here on our on the podcast here, Marcine. So, question number one was a doozy. Okay, so let's even go even further into the rabbit hole of taxation. What are the federal and state taxes? And this is specifically now. I mentioned earlier, is this across the U.S. when I introduced the podcast. So we talked a little bit about L.A., but now we're going to spread out the rest of the country. So what are the federal and state taxes that are imposed? And we're going to talk about non-residents. So think about my Canadian brethren moving down here to the U.S. What are some of the taxes that are imposed on them when they sell a U.S.-based property? They've been down, they bought a property, maybe they're in Florida, maybe they're in Arizona, maybe they're here in California, and now they're putting a property up for sale. So what are the federal and state taxes that they're going to be subject to when they sell the property?
So I don't know how this works in Canada, but every state imposes different state tax rates, right? Florida, for example, does not have state tax, but their cost of living exponentially is so much higher than California. Okay. But universally across the United States, including Alaska, Hawaii, the United States is very happy for you to invest all your money here, but you're not leaving with all your money. You're going to be making a donation to the federal government, just like the rest of us do, if you have a capital gains event. The unfortunate part is you can't predetermine this until you're in an escrow or in a transaction throughout the US, and you can file for an exemption certificate. Unfortunately, those filings are taking 18 months to process, and escrow and any closing agent throughout the United States, because that's called basically what we're all called settlement agents, to universally broad brush that, no matter what you do, if you're an attorney, title, escrow, right? So settlement agents across the United States are actually tasked with holding and remitting these taxes, state and federal. Now, the requirement is made of us, but the way the law is written, and Wayne, you may know this, the way the law is written is that if we as your agent do not recognize a foreign person, and like just because you have a social, anybody who's an illegal alien can just walk into Social Security and get a Social Security number. That isn't a litmus test to be an exempt FERPTA person. Green cards, you're exempt. There's certain levels by what dual citizenship. So, but they are few and far between. So what happens is the way the law is written, it's the buyer's responsibility if it gets missed through your settlement agent to remit that money to the government. Yeah.
The
You didn't know
buyer is
that?
responsible.
The buyer.
Not the seller.
The buyer. Well, the seller's not from the United States. How are
Right.
we going to pursue them?
So the buyer has to make sure that they pay the seller's share of the taxes.
But settlement agents are the vehicle which does that on behalf
I
of the
got
buyer.
it. Yes.
I mean, it's very interesting. And I get that they've structured that way, but sometimes people provide answers to us that are absolutely misleading. They may
Well,
have
I think
socials.
here's and again, I am not a tax person, as I used to joke, I don't play one on TV or here. But I think one of the best ways of determining residency is, where do you pay taxes? Where are you paying taxes? If you, people always talk to me in my world about, well, he's a citizen, and citizen is one thing, but what's your tax residency? That really, to me, is one of the most major
But
determining factor. You cannot, so for me, if you're a tax resident of Canada, you're a resident of Canada,
as
right
a
now.
settlement agent, those are not questions we're allowed to ask.
I'm
But we have to
Thanks for throwing
have,
that little wrench into the machine here for me.
okay. Well, I'm just kind of saying there's certain things we are able to say. We don't practice law unless we're attorneys. We're not title experts in the Western regions. We're escrow experts, and there's certain
Well,
things we can and cannot do.
so you cannot
So,
ask somebody where they're a tax resident of.
not directly, no.
Isn't that something?
We actually, and like I said, it's kind of, I find it very confusing to some end, but we have bought sellers complete what we call a FERPTA form, which they state under penalty of perjury that they are not an illegal alien, essentially.
Right.
And by the way, a lot of people who do have social security numbers will fill it out, sign it, but they don't qualify. Just because you have a social doesn't qualify you under FERPTA as being exempt. It's
That's
it's a
fascinating.
very complex law.
I'm going to tell you. That's 3 episodes of the Three Questions podcast right there, just on that one. Although I don't know how many people would be
I'd
delighted
have
with
to get
that.
really buffed up to do
I
something else
don't know.
or get another specialist. And by the way,
That's I said that tongue in cheek, just to be clear here, but that's amazing.
and by the way, what I do with my sellers, because it's absolutely unbelievably reasonable. There's one company across the United States that all they do are help foreign sellers apply for exemption or partial exemption certificates.
Hmm.
So what happens is the settlement agent, we hold the money. Okay. We have to hold the money on the sale price, not on their proceeds, but on their sale price. So we hold all the money. So what happens is they file all the legal documents with the federal government. That's not our space. We don't know how to do that. And then they charge a very nominal fee, and they work with people from all over the world. Wayne, that is their only job. Based in
Interesting.
Florida, they're called FERPTA Solutions. So, I mean, just if that's something you want to post somewhere, but it's a really great tip, and we work with them. They know me. We work with them all the time.
Beautiful. The other thing I have to think about is a seller. When you sell a property, I know, for example, I have clients that are from Canada that live here in the United States. When they sell their home in Canada, there's some withholding that they have to also deal with as a seller. So in other words, you sell a home for $1 million. The federal government in Canada will probably keep around 250,000 or 25% of that for tax purposes before they actually release that. So that actually gets held back on the sale of the property.
Would that be every property regardless?
If you're a resident, if you're not a resident of Canada and you sell a property and the property's in Canada and you're here, they will withhold a certain amount of that money until everything is closed, and that sometimes can take 6 months or more, or
Yeah.
even longer.
Well, the US federal government is so
This
slow.
isn't Canada. This is
I
Canada
understand.
Revenue Agency, the Canadian version of the IRS.
Yeah, fun.
Yeah. All right, so we've got through 2 questions, and the third question is this. Now, this is from the lens of the seller. As the seller of a property, what are the closing costs that I will need to cover? And I think that's the key descriptor there. So if you could get into that. So
Yeah,
question
happy
number 3
to.
of the podcast today.
So closing costs, while they're negotiable by area, there's local area customs. So like I had mentioned earlier about how Northern California, they split some of these taxes and things with buyers. We do not do that down here.
In Southern California.
Right. And the CAR, which is the California Association of Realtor Forms, leaves that option so your agent can mark off if it's a buyer or seller charge or both. So for example, on top of commission, which is traditionally about 5%, sellers can expect another 2% in basic charges on a sale of under 5 million. What they're traditionally local and customary in the general Southern California region, and I'd say that's maybe San Luis Obispo south.
I was going to ask you that. That was exactly, I was going to.
Really?
Where's the line? Where does it?
Let's go with San Luis Obispo south, all the way to San Diego. So for example, sellers local and customary, title insurance for owners. Now in Canada, title insurance, which I am absolutely mystified how they do this, I mean this from the bottom of my heart, is optional. In the States, it is not an option. It is absolutely not just critical, but mandatory. And I would never close a transaction here or anyplace else in the world that didn't offer some form of title insurance. Do you need me to expand on that a little, or are you familiar?
Well, the title insurance in Canada plays an interesting role, and it protects the owner of a home from fraud. I mean, there's some incredible stories in Canada of, and who it really affects is those who have their house free and clear of any debt. And what you'll see is people will go in and basically steal their identity, and then they'll go to a bank and say, "I am, Joe Smith."
And it's very commonplace here too. Those bad things happen everywhere.
And they'll open a line of credit. Let's just again use simple math here. $1 million home, they'll go take down a line of credit for say $500,000-$600,000,
right?
Unbeknownst to the owner, and they'll get the line set up. They'll steal the identity, get the line set up, and then they'll clean it out. Obviously, they'll max out the line, walk away, and then the homeowner, not knowing any of this, will find out 3 months later that the bank is calling and saying, "Where's you haven't made a payment, and if you don't make one pretty quickly here, we're going to foreclose." And it's like,
right.
On what?
Right.
And the purpose of title insurance.
It's very sad because it's not uncommon. It is a common thing. It's a common happening in the States as well, which is really, really sad. But title insurance, the owner's policy protects the buyer from anything fraudulent that happens as of the day of close backwards, right? And title insurance is forever insurance. So one of the great things with title insurance is it protects you forever while you own the property. Now, Alta coverage is paid, the owner's is paid by the seller. Alta coverage is paid by the buyer. And that protects the buyer's lender. And that is also absolutely mandatory throughout the US.
And that's a seller's expense.
Buyer expense.
Buyer's expense. Pardon
the owner's policy, seller. The Alta policy, buyer. Okay. Transfer taxes, which was the subject of our the first part of this conversation. Transfer taxes traditionally, again, south of San Luis Obispo, seller expense 100%. And every municipality and local area is going to have a little bit different tax. So, that is a seller expense. Escrow fees and document preparation fees for all the legal documents, we draft all of those. All those kind of fees, wire fees, couriers, third-party vendors, those are all paid out of escrow. All the fees, owner's title insurance, commission, transfer taxes, escrow fees, everything is based on final sales price. So if you buy something for $300,000, it's going to be a lot cheaper than buying something for $3 million.
No kidding.
There's just an exposure,
because it's proportionate.
Right. It's a risk exposure thing. So you can pretty much, for a seller, count on 2%. For a buyer, it's
2%
going to
above the
vary.
5% commission.
2% above the commission, correct.
Right. So how many, I got to ask you a question just as a follow-up to that one. How many sellers, I guess the seasoned ones, I guess maybe how often when you inform the seller of these additional expenses do you get that glazed over shocked look as opposed to, oh, is that more of a rude awakening than anything for a lot of your clients? Is that,
Well,
or
I think the hard part, and frankly, this person called while I was sitting here, I have an Australian seller who insists that he's not foreign because our countries are friendly. Don't even get me going. And he wants to know if his escrow closed today, and he's been very, very difficult. He's the only seller I've ever had in the history of dealing with FERPTA matters for over 40 years that has given me such a hard time insisting, I'm sure you're wrong, which is fascinating. So, long story short, it's a big eye opener for foreign investors or foreign sellers that are selling. Americans are more like their agents get them a pre-sale estimate. They kind of know they're on top of the
and
news.
they're prepared, they're better prepared is what you're
I
saying.
think they're a little better prepared. If you're a regular seller, not foreign, and you're selling an investment property, then
Then this is what water off a duck's back, part of doing business.
kind
Okay.
of, but the state does have a local handhold on or withhold of tax on sellers if it's not your principal residence. But in a foreign situation, the state is 3 1/3%, and the feds are 15% of final purchase price. So it can be, that's why it's shocking. And I get it. It's a big number.
Mm.
It's a big number. Yeah.
Well, here's what I think I can say pretty unequivocally is that I'm pretty sure this conversation has prompted some additional questions from those who've been listening in today. I feel pretty confident about. So for those interested in contacting you directly, Marcine, they want to, I want to talk to this lady and learn more about this. I have more questions. What is the best way for them to reach you? How can they contact you?
Email is fantastic because I will see that 7 days a week. My email is mkline, KLINE at closedescrowinc.com. But if you're not comfortable with email, you want to call in, the phone number here is 818-850-4980.
Marcine, I want to thank you again for joining us. Our special guest on today's episode of the Three Questions podcast is from Studio City, California, Marcine Kline. She's Vice President of Closed Escrow. Marcine, thank you very much. I look forward to bringing you the Three Questions podcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And to receive a notification of when our latest episode has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the description link below, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.